Hello there, I'm Dr. Jordan Peterson. I'm a clinical psychologist, a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto, an author, a podcaster, public speaker, and today I'm surrounded by 25 atheists. My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
Good afternoon, Dr. Peterson.
How are you doing?
So this claim here that atheists don't know what they're rejecting. My background is in studying to become a traditional Catholic priest, daily mass, daily rosary, going on long retreats, deep into the magisterium and biblical hermeneutics. Like I was thoroughly in it. And it seems like I do know what I'm missing. Is there something that I missed over years of study, both this issue formally and living out religion so deeply?
Well, you obviously feel that you missed something when you were practicing for the priesthood. Your aim was off then. So there's always the possibility that it's still off now.
What was off about my aim in the first place?
I don't know. That might take a long time to figure out.
But then it seems kind of like this no true Scotsman type of fallacy in which you're the arbiter of people's aims and how they understand those aims to be. How is it that you can claim that people don't know something that you know about their life despite not having met them?
Well, it's obviously a generic claim, just like the atheists claim that there's no God is a generic claim. In your case, it would have to be specified more, and I'm not claiming to understand what was going on in your mind, but my experience with atheists is twofold.
Okay, I'm sorry.
They have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God.
I know we're not very far in, but like, it's a generic claim. Atheists don't understand what they're rejecting is a generic claim, just like there's no God is a generic claim, is a really weird thing to say. Like seriously, what does that mean?
Well, we're not specifying which God, though.
I think he might kind of mean the word general instead of generic. I feel
because generic makes sense for his claim. Yeah. I mean, because he's saying like atheists don't understand this. It's like, okay, he's making a generic claim, right? You know, he's saying like, you know, it's like if you know, the classic example is like if you say bears are dangerous, that's not falsified by the existence of like a few old toothless bears.
Okay, fair, yeah.
Right, you know, because like you're making it. What you're saying is like generally speaking, bears are dangerous, right? So it's like sure. So he's saying generally speaking. Atheists don't understand what they're rejecting. Maybe this guy's an exception. If that's all he had said, I still would have thought it was silly because it's like it's a generic claim that's like baseless. Like you know, like you need to tell me why you think that, right? But like, and it just seems kind of ridiculous on its face. But like, okay, like I at least understand the structure of the move. But like. Yeah. It's a generic claim, just like there's no God is a generic claim. Like, what's the category relative to which you can just sort of be generally that, like, there's no God. Like that seems like a pretty straightforward binary claim, right? That there's like that this is like here's a thing people say is true. I don't think this specific thing is true, right? I don't think this specific entity exists. I mean, it's like actually the joke Andy said earlier would actually be the thing that would literally make the most sense of it, right? You know, it's like. I'm saying, well, there aren't any gods. You know, maybe we'll look into it, and you know, maybe, you know, Dionysus is real, and you know, maybe Amun-Ra, right? We're still looking into that one, right? But generally speaking, these entities are made of.
Yeah, I think it's a weird category.
So we're off to a promising start.
Yes.
Let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak, and that's left them with an animus.
But I think that you have a reductive view of what atheism is. You've defined religion so broadly to include any sort of having aim in life, any sort of cultural archetypes or having a metaphorical substrate. And atheism to you is a very specific type of like three people in the world that are these Raskolnikov type of they want to get away with a perfect murder. It seems like you have the reductive view of what an atheist is.
Well, let's start with your claim. How do you define the God that you're rejecting? Like, what is God to you? You studied in the church, you found that unsatisfactory. How would you characterize what you rejected?
I think the average Christian believer, when they say that they're Christian and they believe, they mean some sort of God that is all powerful, all perfect, is somehow involved in the matters of this world, and that we look to them through wisdom and with Logos incarnate in Christ. And it also seems like you don't believe in religion in the way that the average Christian says that they believe in religion. And there are as many gods out there as there are believers, because everybody has mutually exclusive and different views of what God is. So it seems
Well,
like
if everybody had mutually exclusive views of what God is, no one could speak to each other. The mere fact of communication presumes a commonality of assumption and definition. And it's certainly not the case that I regard any archetypal manifestation whatsoever as equally religious. So that's not a real claim. Let me give you an example. For example, there's a sub-narrative in the story of Moses where Moses is rewarded with a glimpse of God. Okay, and that's one of the ways that God is characterized in the Old Testament stories.
yes.
Now, Moses is a faithful servant of God and a good man. At least that's the case within the confines of the story.
One possible
It's
interpretation.
the case within the confines of the story, obviously. But
Well, not obviously. When we look at the Bible can't precisely say anything because there are so many different exegetical and hermeneutic views of this particular book, and that everybody has everybody has disagreed historically on, it seems like, even the most benign detail about a book this big. And it seems like you can only say that the Bible says something if you first presuppose that it's univocal.
So your claim essentially is that Moses in the Old Testament plays the role of a villain or is irrelevant? Because the alternative claim
I'm
is
saying that we
he's
can't
good.
know because we can't talk to those authors.
If you are going to start with the presupposition that there's nothing I can say about any of these stories that you're not going to disagree with from the perspective that there are multiple potential competing claims, then I can't speak with you. So
and we also have a short time here, so I want to get to the core of what you're arguing here, and I'd love if we could.
The core of what I'm arguing is that atheists reject God, but they don't understand.
Let's just real quick. So Peterson is kind of rejecting, like a multiplicity of perspectives as a way to get around arguing the actual case, right? That's he's rejecting that. So we'll see if he sticks to that later. He's saying he's basically saying we have to agree on some things to even have a conversation, right?
Right.
So
exactly right. It's like, look, based on this, like last little bit, I mean, it's like, kind of sympathetic to his point, right? It's like, oh, come on, you can't just quibble with every little thing, that's the, that's ridiculous. Communication is impossible if we don't take for granted some kind of, implied definitions. You know what? These are very good points, Dr. Peterson. Let's keep those in mind as we watch the rest of the discussion.
Understand what they're rejecting. So I'm trying to give you an example of what's being rejected and its complexity. Okay, so God rewards Moses with a glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
A possible one.
I said I didn't say the. I said
That is possible, yes.
Okay. So despite the fact that Moses is a stellar character and he's had a long and difficult life and can withstand a lot of difficulty and travail, God puts him between two cliffs so he can just see a crack of what's in front of him. And when God walks by, he allows him to see his back. Okay, so the implication of that story is that the divine is fundamentally unknowable. It's a pinnacle experience, and that people in their finitude have to be shielded from a comprehensive vision of the basis of reality. Well, that's not the God that's defined in that manner, right? It's not a simple personification. It's not a simple old man in the sky. It's something that in its essence is unknowable and overwhelming. And that isn't, in my experience, the God that's defined by atheists who are attempting to undermine the story. I mean, it's the same claim, for example, that you're a finite creature and that you face something that in the final analysis is unknowable, and that you have to establish a relationship with it regardless of your inability to perceive or even withstand perceiving the whole. Okay, is there a problem with that?
I mean, the problem is that when we look at, famously, when you've been asked, do you believe in God? The question becomes, what do we mean by God? And in the Bible, it's not even clear the biblical authors know what God is, because Yahweh has historically emerged from an early storm god, a deity that doesn't exhaust the category of deity, and it has changed over the Old Testament. Does God have physicality? Does God not have physicality? It seems like, yes, if you define religion to mean anybody that has an aim, anybody that looks at the unknown, anybody who wants to go from chaos to order is inherently religious, then yes. But also in the same way, I could define atheist as somebody who doesn't dogmatically believe in a religion, or somebody who doesn't regularly attend religious services or belong to a denomination. To help especially the audience kind of like boil this down, there was a lot of words there. That the central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
A central claim.
A central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
No, I said that we were finite and we had to establish a relationship with the infinite.
Yeah, then in that case, then we're all religious, but then I can do the same thing and define one particular element of atheism. It seems like we both have a reductive view of what the other side looks like, to the point where a conversation seems incoherent, and not just incoherent, but not in the way that the average Christian understands Christianity to be.
Do you have a problem?
This guy didn't go viral because I don't think he was looking for the gotcha moment, like some of those, maybe some of the other people did. But I do like, kind of I like what he's putting forth, and I think what Jordan Peterson is saying fine about like some type of spirituality being like a relationship, between an finite being and the infinite. But it is like a huge, I agree that it's like a huge diversion from what most people mean when they say I'm Christian or I'm atheist or something like that. He's kind of going for this like middle way spirituality, which contains a lot of people who are maybe in the middle, which I guess is kind of where he's at. But it's definitely muddying the water. So this guy also seems like he might be a little bit out of Peterson's league when it comes to like biblical studies and stuff like that, just based on like what he's talking about.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I think that look, I think part of why this isn't part of it that went viral is that I think this guy is trying to bite off a lot at once, and I actually think he would be better off picking his battles a little bit more than he is here. That like, he's kind of trying to cover a lot of things at once. He's, probably like parts of what we just watched, he's disputing things he doesn't really need to dispute, although yes, it's very funny given what we know is coming. That that Jordan Peterson is objecting.
Yeah, no, I think
every little thing,
to be fair to him, I think that like I think he got on some like biblical scholar nerd shit for a second that attracted, which is like, it's probably pretty irritating to hear someone be like, the point of the, so I get where he was coming from, but it definitely wasn't productive for like.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think the sort of basic point this guy is making is clearly right. I mean, right, that Peterson is Peterson in presenting himself as a Christian or even presenting himself as not an atheist is playing a very weird game, right? Because like, again, do you actually believe in the stuff that like, I mean, certainly, I mean, in the clip that, we were watching via Timcast at the beginning, right, he's talking about going to a Catholic church, to check them out, right? It's like, if he actually wanted to, be baptized as a Catholic, I mean, I'm assuming that, that's not his background. And he had to go through that process. And he had to explain his beliefs to a priest, right? Like, I don't think the priest would accept this as like, you've accepted Catholic doctrine, right? Like, this is clearly not right. I mean, like, or if like Peterson wanted to get a job at one of those Baptist colleges where they make you sign a faith statement and, like all that, right? It's like, he clearly would not pass that test, right? I mean, because there's so many layers of like sort of literary bullshit about, and like Jungianism and whatever that like, it's like, okay, but like, do you actually believe? Oh no. Oh.
Somebody's frozen. Is it Ben?
It was, it was me. Yeah. I was worried about this because I've been having some issues at this place. I reset the router just before we went on, and at least that took me through the main show with no issues.
Yeah, both of us are having internet issues, but yeah, I hear you.
You know, but it's like, look, if the answer is, does Jordan Peterson believe that like there's an all powerful creator of the world, then like seems kind of like no, right? Because it seemed like
no. It
seems like if the answer was yes, at some point he would get around to saying that.
Yeah, I mean, real quick before we get to the next one, what I would say is like, you know, a lot of what Peterson says is irritating, but I think his basic proposition about spirituality is one that I kind of share with. I actually share with him as someone who's interested in some aspects of spirituality, but I would just not really position myself as someone who's going to like argue with atheists. You know what I mean? Like,
if the title of the video was "Guy Who's Kind of Spiritual but Not Religious,"
like, yeah, like I wouldn't have a huge argument.
Like an exciting clash.
Yeah, I would just like take a hit and be like, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know, man. We can't really know like that. And then
which again does seem to be kind of his position, because like the other thing, maybe a little bit more substantive, I did want to say about this exchange so far is that Peterson is going on about the unknowability of God, but it's like, well, hold on, if you take that this far, that it's like, well, you can't. It's like, sure, I can understand you're saying that it's like God is so transcendent and unknowable that it's like, you know, if you say you don't believe in him, what are you even saying? It's like, okay, but that cuts both ways, right? I mean, like, if like, what are you saying if you're saying that you do believe in God? Like, you know, what exactly is it that you then believe in?
Yeah, and I think that's what the guy was kind of trying to say a little bit. All right, let's
continue.
Pause there. Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
David.
David, good to see you.
Tell me everything that you know about the Polynesian deity Lono, L-O-N-O.
I don't know anything about the Polynesian deity Lono.
So you're rejecting something without knowledge of what you're rejecting. I'm
not rejecting it. No more than I'm rejecting.
Do you believe in Lono?
I don't know anything.
Do you believe in Lono? Do you believe that he is a deity that exists in the world, exists in the universe, that exists in the existence of everything? Do you believe that Lono
I'll
is
answer
a
that
being?
question once you answer my question, which is, do I reject everything that I'm ignorant of? Because that's your presupposition that undergirds your argument. And unless you can prove that that's valid, then there's no point.
My question is quite simple.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's formula.
I'm not that into this.
Sure. I mean, look. I mean, but like, whatever you think about the guy's like presentation style, which you know, I'm not, you know, particularly charmed by either. But like, but also, if he were to, if Jordan Peterson were a Christian, this would be a very easy question. Because you know.
Yeah, like, I think it's mostly
the number of gods whose existence you're supposed to believe in as a Christian is one, right? I mean, that's it, right? Like, you know, if you say, oh, there's this other part of the world where they worship this god, you know, that's not the, you know, that's not the God of the Christian Trinity, right? Then do you believe in this? You know, do you believe in this other God that I just told you about? The answer should be no.
Yeah, it's a constant reminder how it's hilariously mismatched because they all think they're trying to argue against a Christian and they're just not. Like they're just like, again, guy who's kind of spiritual. Like,
yeah,
I can relate to what
guy who's kind of vaguely spiritual but not religious versus 20 atheists would not be a compelling title that would get a bunch of people to sign up.
No, like if that guy said that to me, I'd be like, I don't know, probably not. Tell me more. Sounds interesting. I don't really like.
Yeah. You kind of responded at like a less abrasive Jordan Peterson because again, I mean, if you're just sort of vaguely spiritual, this makes perfect sense. But if you were a Christian, it's like, look, monotheism means that you actively disbelieve in the existence of any God. Except, you know, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's it.
Yeah. And he's also not espousing some because listen, I'm not a theological expert, but there's definitely a way in which he could try to say, like, my conception of God is one that contains like other deities could be part of one big Godhead or some shit like that. You know what I mean? He actually could go for something like that, like maybe some like
he could go for something like that. I mean, that's but I think that his
he's not.
I think he's not going to for one thing, because like he's already dancing on the line enough about his relationship to Christianity that like, you know, they're still like that. I think like sort of like actual like really religious evangelical Christians are sort of divided about him, right? You know, like a lot of them kind of like him anyway. Some of them sort of see him as one of them. A lot of them are very frustrated because they can tell he's been evasive about it, right? But if he, like, you know, if you're a Hindu, you can get away with saying shit like that.
Yes,
right? You know,
yes.
right? You know, you know, it's like, oh, I think even Jesus is is one of the avatars of, you know, Vishnu or whatever, right? Like that's, you know, you can get away with that just fine, right? You know, but if you're a Christian, I mean, if you're a Christian, I mean, there are kinds of Christians who could get away with that, but that's
he's also
really Jordan Peterson's demo, right? I mean,
that's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if it's like, you're in the church, the church by the beach, in Costa Mesa, where they've got some like surfboards, lined up against the outside of the church, that like, then sure, you can start saying shit like that. It's like, oh, I actually think that Lona, what was his name, the Polynesian deity? There's the
I think Lono,
Yeah, no, I think maybe, man, I think Lono is actually an aspect of, the larger divine, whatever, right? Like, but like those aren't the kinds of Christians who watch, who subscribe to the Daily Wire and, and to get Jordan Peterson content.
Yeah, fair enough.
Related accurately.
Do you believe that Lono exists? Yes or no?
I'm not going to answer that question for the reasons I just described. You already insisted that if I reject something, that if I'm ignorant of something, I reject it. Do you think that everyone in the world has to know everything simultaneously for that to be valid and true?
I think in order for your argument to be true, in order for it to be true that we atheists don't understand what we're rejecting, then you need to also apply that to yourself and to Christians and to Muslims and to any other person on this earth, where if you don't understand you're rejecting the belief in, then you can't reject the belief in it. That's the implication of your claim.
I didn't say that I rejected the belief in Lona. I said I didn't know who Lono was. I didn't say anything about rejecting.
That's because I've asked you several times and you haven't. But let me get to my even greater point.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying atheists don't understand what religion is or what God is in order to be able to reject it fully or completely. We have someone over here who studied it in their own way. I've studied religion. I have a degree in religious studies, specialty in Christianity and Mediterranean traditions. And further than that, beyond me, Pew Research studies suggest that atheists and agnostics actually know more about religion and about religious stories, the foundational principles, than believers.
That's because they're more religious than they think they are.
Okay.
They're concerned with deep matters, and one of the defining characteristics of someone who's oriented in a religious direction is that they're concerned with deep matters.
Okay.
In fact, it's virtually definition.
Okay,
right,
sorry. This is all right. You're saying earlier the guy, the first guy, that there was a point where he was being annoying because he was bringing in this like, biblical scholar nerd shit, right? I too have some nerd shit I feel the need to bring up here.
No, I like the nerd shit guy. I just think it was good. It worked for me, but not not for Jubilee. Anyway, continue.
So there's something called the fallacy of the undistributed middle, where you say like, cats are mammals, dogs are mammals, therefore cats are dogs, right? Yes. Like that's like you're saying that two things each have a property, and that therefore, right? They're the same thing. What he says, well, that's good, so he responds to atheists in polls or, know more about, Christian beliefs than, Christian believers. Well, that actually shows they're more religious. They thought they were because they're, and then like he's, which like already he's doing some very like no true Scotsman stuff, but then he says, because they're concerned with deep matters. And, one of the defining features of being religious, they're concerned with deep matters. Like, but hold on, right? That's like, it's like, sure, if you want to say whether or not there's a God is a deep matter, then like if you're somebody who's very invested in saying yes or somebody who's very invested in saying no, either way you're concerned with deep matters. But that doesn't really mean that yes and no are the same answer.
Well, listen, when we're talking about the existence of the megalodon, the giant shark, we're talking about being concerned with deep waters, right? So both groups are concerned with deep waters, right? So by this, the people who deny the existence of the megalodon is in a way they believe in it even more, right?
Well, okay.
That's exactly what the movie The Meg was about.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we said we were going to do half an hour. We're past it, but let's at least finish this guy.
Have to identify with a religious tradition and accept the foundational stories that go along.
Well, that would mean more that they're sectarian than that they're religious. And most people, for example, in the United States, deny that they're religious, but accept that they're spiritual.
Let's pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, that is a very good point in the chat. All babies are atheists, damn heathens. Because if you this is actually something I've always thought was a little ridiculous about, like, there's a certain kind of internet atheist who's very who basically thinks it's unfair that anybody should ask them to prove the non-existence of God, and so they're one of their ways of getting out of it, which, I actually, for the record, I mean, I think, Leah, if you have a position, you should have an argument for it, right? Like there are, in fact, lots of arguments for atheism, but, learn them and, make them if you're going to have that position, right? But like there's a certain kind of internet atheist who's like, well, it's a ridiculous expectation that I'd be asked to prove there's no God. And anyway, why should I have to? And part of the way that they do this is by saying, oh, actually, atheism isn't the assertion that there isn't a God. It's just like not believing in God. And one of the things that I've always found ridiculous about that is like, well, okay, if that were true, right? My, the cat that you have sometimes seen walking around behind me in his videos would be an atheist on that definition, right? I really don't think he is. Right. That's to
be fair, the cats believe that they are the God.
Sure. Like it's not this bottle of scotch is not an atheist. Right? Like even though it doesn't possess the belief that God exists. That's
yeah. No, although I think you were discussing, what is it? The belief that like everything had like consciousness is part of the makeup. Yeah, panpsychism. We don't have time to go into it. But basically, I saw someone using panpsychism to try to justify why they talk to ChatGPT as if it is a person, awesome. and they're in spiritual psychosis.
Although. I have to say I've had the most positive feelings about ChatGPT ever since earlier tonight, hearing ChatGPT's characterization of me.
Yeah. As long as we don't put that forth as our own writing, then I think
yeah. Exactly.
Like, I wrote the funniest joke about you, Nathan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah. So it's like, okay, I think that's ridiculous. But wait a second. Given Jordan Peterson's description, it's like, oh, people who think they're atheists are actually religious because they're concerned with deep matters. I mean, like, okay. Now, like, those examples that I'm normally inclined to think, oh, it'd be ridiculous to say my cat is an atheist, it'd be ridiculous to say this bottle of scotch is an atheist. Well, maybe those are the only atheists on Peterson's definition, because, like, if you're capable of abstract thought and you're interested in the question of whether God exists, then Peterson says, "Oh, you're concerned with deep matters, therefore you're religious."
I don't.
There's a video
No, go
of a
ahead.
dog that has a mat that it communicates like in English to its owner,
Yeah, I've seen
and
it.
it sees its reflection in the mirror and asks its owner, "Who is that?" And she's like, "It's you." And then the dog just goes to the window and stares out at, like, contemplating the fact that inside the mirror is the dog, and doesn't quite grasp this concept. So therefore, according to Jordan Peterson, this dog actually is religious.
Because he's contemplating deep matters. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, and you're this is just such a weird game, because obviously the incredibly inclusive version of religion that he's promoting is just so at odds with like how most religious leaders, at least operating, at least in this country, I would say, right?
No, I mean,
Conceive of religion. And like, I think that, you know, like you mentioned, talking to most like Christian sects in this country, like leaders of that religion, you're like, hey, the bad news is that, you know, more and more Americans consider themselves not religious and not part of a sect. But good news is they do consider themselves spiritual. So everything's fine. You know, I don't think they'd be happy with that.
No, exactly. Like I mean, it just seems like I think that the sort of core point that these guys, you know, seem, you know, the two that we've seen so far and the guy in the preview clip, I think have all been getting out in their own ways, which is totally right? Is like, look, I mean, I think if you told most people who actually like think of themselves not just as like, oh, I'm kind of spiritual or whatever, but like as like actual religious believers.
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, I don't think that there's any sort of conscious, you know, entity with intention that brought about the existence of the universe. I don't think anything happens when you die. But, you know, sure, is there some sense in which there's an aspect of reality that's infinite or unknowable? Yeah. So basically, you and I agree. Right? Like, that's, you know, that doesn't really seem like you agree, right? Like, it seems like you're saying very different things. And, you know, it's just, I don't know. It's, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever read the 12 Rules for Life, but in an effort to help the two of you turn your lives around, I'm going to tell you a couple of the 12 rules. So if you head over to the 12 Rules for Life Wikipedia page, you get a handy little list here. Most of this actually I think is pretty good advice. I think that don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them is like, I don't know, man, good luck with that. But
yeah, no, kids automatically hate everything their parents do. You know, I go out, I hang out with rock stars and talk to celebrities and my kids are unimpressed.
Yeah.
I
think it's easier to change what you like. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you're going to raise another human being with consciousness and free will from infancy without that human being ever doing anything that like pisses you off. Like that just doesn't seem like a realistic expectation. So I am gonna kind of call bullshit on rule number 5, and also, of course, the rule number 6 is just Peterson sneaking in, his right-wing politics and his self-help advice that set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And my co-father with the longshoreman and the ChatGPT depiction of me, Slavoj Žižek, had the perfect response to this in this debate with Peterson. He was like, hold on. Is this advice you would give to like a dissident in North Korea? Right? Set your house in perfect order before you start criticizing things. Come on. So 5 and 6 I think are pretty dumb. But the other 10 of these are very solid pieces of life advice. I don't think they're particularly unique to Jordan Peterson. I think this is pretty much what you get from any number of self-help sources, but I will happily endorse 10 of the 12 rules. But I just want to briefly, before we go for today, we're gonna watch the rest of this. I actually booked earlier today. R.M. Brown has not been on the show in a while. He's going to join us on next week's post game to watch a little bit more of this. So should be a good time. So we're going to watch more of this, and maybe some of this will change as we do. But I just want to really quickly look at how Peterson's performance in the parts of the debate we've watched so far has stacked up with these rules. Rule number 8. Yeah, let's just do 8 through 10. Rule number 8 is tell the truth or at least don't lie. Whether he's doing that with regard to his position is an interesting question. Rule number 9 is assume the person you are listening to might know something that you don't. Is that the demeanor that Dr. Peterson has been showing in these exchanges?
No.
And then rule number 10 is the one I really want to highlight here, which is be precise in your speech.
Yeah.
Yeah. So looking at the way he's treating concepts like Christian and atheist, is Jordan Peterson being precise in his speech? That perhaps is something to think about.